I know it seems early, but it's about that time to start thinking for the fantasy football playoffs. Now, I'm going to operate under the assumption that your league playoffs is going to run through weeks 15, 16, 17, with the championship being in week 17. Now, if your championship's in week 18, I have news for you. You need to fix that. You should not be playing in the last week of the season. Obviously, usage will be very hard to predict, and honestly, it will just be a complete random crapshoot. But if we're looking at these 3 weeks, I want to go through and I want to rank the top 10 best running back playoff schedules and let you know if that running back in their backfield may be a buy or a sell dependent on their value that we have on flogfantasy.com. Starting off with the New England Patriots, and you're at 10, the 10th best playoff schedule. You're going up against the Chiefs, which is kind of whatever. You're going up against the Bills. These rush defenses have so far been middle of the road so far this season, where the Chiefs have allowed the 20th most points. The Bills have allowed the 15th most points. So it's kind of whatever. You have two average matchups, but then a phenomenal matchup against the Denver Broncos, where currently the Denver Broncos have allowed the most points to opposing running backs. Now, if you're going to go over and look at the community rankings on flogfantasy.com, Ramondre Stevenson's actually fallen outside the top 24 running backs. And honestly, I think he should be viewed as that low-end RB2, high-end RB3, probably more so around RB22-ish, just because of his usage as a receiver. And I do want to reiterate that usage as a receiver is going to matter a ton when you're going up against these defenses like the Chiefs and the Bills, where obviously the Patriots will be trailing in the second half, and you need your running back able to catch the ball. Now, going over to our next team, the Indianapolis Colts, aka Jonathan Taylor, coming in with the 9th best schedule, and you could actually make an argument to have him higher than this. He's going to be playing the Steelers, Falcons, Raiders. Falcons matchup will be a tough one. The Falcons are a bottom 5 team in the NFL in total points allowed to the running back positions this season. They're currently sitting at 27th, but the Steelers, Raiders, great matchups. The Steelers are at the 7th most points allowed to the running back position, whereas the Raiders are with the 4th most. If you look at the price point on Jonathan Taylor currently, I think it's a very appealing buy. Jonathan Taylor currently sitting here as RB6 in the flogfantasy.com community rankings. Now, keep in mind, these community rankings are derived by you, not necessarily us. If you're looking at the expert rankings on flogfantasy.com, that'll be a little bit different. An example of that is in the community rankings, you have DeAndre Swift ahead of Jonathan Taylor. In the expert rankings, you have Taylor ahead of DeAndre Swift. But nonetheless, I'm completely fine buying in on Jonathan Taylor as the mid RB1. Clearly does continue to expand his role in this backfield, which we want to see for the playoffs. Now, going over to our next team, the Kansas City Chiefs just simply do not have a bad matchup here, ladies and gentlemen. The Chiefs will be going up against the Pats, the Raiders, and the Bengals. The Patriots-Bengals have been right in the middle of the road in points allowed at 14th, 16th, but the Raiders are a top 5 matchup. So honestly, I mean, it's just a safe spot where you never have to bench Isaiah Pacheco, right? I understand Pacheco hasn't been great as of late, but ultimately, if you're looking at the percentage of this offense that he accounts for, the percentage of the backfield that he has seen, he is still someone that you are pretty excited about overall. Now, if you're going to be looking at his ranking comparison to some other guys, right now he's RB 18 in the community rankings. He is directly ahead of Rachaad White, Kyren Williams, Aaron Jones. Now, if I would be looking at this range, I'd say maybe I'd prefer Aaron Jones in a full PPR format, but Pacheco is someone that he can rely on being a consistent RB2 here. Now, going over to the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is a little bit of an interesting spot in that you have 3 good matchups. You have the Colts, who have allowed the 5th most points. You have the Bengals, who are right in the middle of the road. You have the Seattle Seahawks that are kind of in the middle of the road as well. But with the Steelers, it's very difficult to be excited about either player, right? Because if you are looking at Najee, if you are looking at Jaylen Warren, these are 2 running backs that just eat into each other's workloads. Right now, you have Najee Harris as RB28 in the community rankings. You have Jaylen Warren at RB33. I've said it once, I'll say it again. Generally, when you are looking at these 2 backs, they are handcuff running backs. If you were to see an injury to Najee Harris, then Jaylen Warren looks like he could be a league winner. If you were to see an injury to Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris could 100% be viable in fantasy. But as it stands currently, if these guys are sharing the backfield and this is a bad offense overall, even if they have a good schedule in the fantasy football playoffs, they're not going to be startable. but maybe this just is something to keep in the back of your mind where oh, okay, well, if we do have that injury to Najee, we can be pretty damn confident to just go all in there when it comes to a Mr. Jaylen Warren. Now, going over to our next team, we will have the Raiders. The Raiders kind of in the same boat with the Chiefs, with the Steelers. I'd say all these are about the same. The top five is where things get really exciting. But the Raiders are going to go up the Chargers. They're kind of middle of the road. They're 13th. The Chiefs, middle of the road. They're 20th. And then the Colts, who are a top five defense that we want to be playing, with them giving up the 5th most points to opposing running backs. Jacobs is a running back, however, that I think it's going to be dependent on your price point. If we're going to go ahead and look at the community rankings on flogfantasy.com, he's currently RB10, which in my mind, very fair price to pay. I mean, I possibly could see you selling Saquon Barkley to go out there and get Josh Jacobs if you were very worried about the Giants schedule, which I will say there's a reason to be concerned with the Giants. We're actually covering the 10 worst running back matchups on flogfantasy.com in a video over there if you want to check those out. The Giants probably are on there. But nonetheless, you can start him as that low-end RB1, high-end RB2. Just going to be a bad spot with the offense for Jacobs. Now, here's where the matchups get really good. Starting off with the Tennessee Titans. We have 2 games against the Texans and a game against the Seattle Seahawks. The Texans have allowed the 9th most points to opposing running backs this season. And on top of this, we've historically seen when it comes to Derrick Henry, this will be a running back that gets better as the season goes on. Like with Derrick Henry, we know that he just goes out there and he beats down opponents over time. He wears you out. And then at the end of the year, we have seen massive blowups in fantasy football playoffs histories before. Yeah, and a lot of blowups have happened against teams like the Houston Texans. Now, with that being said, obviously, this is a little bit of a different Texans team than what we have seen in the past. But nonetheless, I think you'd be excited about the Derrick Henry workload. If you're looking at his community ranking on flogfantasy.com, he's currently sitting at RB12, which, yeah, I think it's a completely fair price point to pay with Derrick Henry. Now, going over to the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland has 3 top 10 matchups where you have the Jets, who have allowed the 10th most points, the Texans, who have allowed the 9th, and the Bears, who have allowed the 8th. Obviously, the Jets have a great defense overall, but the thing with the Jets defense is this is a great passing defense where you by no means want your quarterback going against them. By no means do you want your wide receivers going against them. But in theory, maybe you have like Jerome Ford as a viable option. The issue is, as we were talking about way back when people were super excited to spend all their fab on Jerome Ford, and we were saying, pump the brakes. It's going to be a running back by committee here. Jerome Ford's not necessarily a great talent. Kareem Hunt has been stealing rushing touchdowns. If you look at the community rankings on flogfantasy.com, you have Jerome Ford at RB30. You have Kareem Hunt at RB37, which is kind of in a fair range in my mind, right? Neither player's super excited without an injury to another guy. And I know a lot of people are going to push back saying the Jets actually have a great defense overall. We'll see on Sunday night, ladies and gentlemen. We get yet another Zach Wilson primetime game, thank God, where they're going to be playing Josh Jacobs. And in that game, you actually have a Garrett Wilson special pick'em, more than less than half a total yard on Underdog Fantasy. If you want to go and check that out, you can find that link in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, you're going to get a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and that Garrett Wilson special pick'em more than less than half a total yard. Now, going over to Philadelphia, Philly, I mean, obviously is already a great rushing deep offense overall. But on top of that, you're going to get a game against the Seattle Seahawks, where Seattle's kind of middle of the road. You're going to get a game against the New York Giants. The Giants have completely given up at this point. So, I mean, I think that their defense is actually going to get even worse. I mean, right now, you actually have this spread between the Dallas Cowboys and New York Giants game, just to give you an idea of what it's going to be looking like here, as 16 points. If you ever head over to Underdog Fantasy, they actually have Tony Pollard currently sitting at 92.5 total yards for his more than less than. Just give you an idea of how bad this Giants defense is going to be going forward. And yeah, I mean, if you're sitting here, just fire up DeAndre Swift over on flogfantasy.com. If we're looking at his community ranking, this is someone that's currently sitting at RB5. I probably would prefer Jonathan Taylor over Swift, however. Now, going over to the number 2 spot, we are going to be looking at the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers have 2 top 5 matchups. You're going up against the Raiders, who have allowed the 4th most points, and going up against the Broncos in the Fantasy Football Championship, who have allowed the most points to opposing running backs. Now, keep in mind, this is going to be a little bit skewed here because obviously we had Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert dropping 1,000 points against this Broncos defense in that singular week. But regardless, great matchup. If you are looking at Austin Eckler, he's the RB2 in the community rankings on flockfantasy.com. And as I've said before, I think that's where he belongs. Like we were talking about selling Travis Etienne for him. I mean, before Etienne had to go on his bye. Now, this is going to be something that I know we get a lot of pushback on. But in my mind, the number one schedule that we have for the fantasy football playoffs at the running back position will be the Atlanta Falcons. Starting it off week 15 with the Carolina Panthers. They've allowed the 2nd most points to opposing running backs this year. You're following it up with the Indianapolis Colts, who've allowed the 5th most points to opposing running backs this year. And then we are going to go with the Chicago Bears, who have allowed the 8th most points to opposing running backs. So you have 2 top 5 defensive matchups and another top 10. All 3 inside the top 10 here for Mr. Bijan Robinson. Now, if you're going to go through and look at what you have currently for Bijan's value, I actually just updated my rankings over there on flockfantasy.com. And if you look at where I currently have Bijan Robinson, I have Bijan Robinson RB7. I have him 21 overall. Whereas if you're going to look at the community rankings, he is at RB15 at 36 overall. I think I still want to be ahead of market on Bijan Robinson based off this playoff schedule, even if Arthur Smith is my arch nemesis. I will tell you that much. If you go over and look at his underdog pick'em right now, the main thing I want to be pointing out is you have 20.5 receiving yards and 3 receptions for his more than less than 81.5 total yards. Bijan Robinson, at the end of the day, while the goal line usage has been very frustrating, this is still a running back that is seeing consistent work as a receiver. This is still a running back that is getting 10 plus carries each and every week. And this is a running back that has the best fantasy football playoff schedule you can find. So in my mind, while Bijan Robinson's been very disappointing and he does not look like the top 3 running back he was drafted to be, I still think I would have him as a running back 1. And if you can buy him as that RB2, which it looks like you can based off those community rankings, I think we would go ahead and look to do so. But I think that should be it for this video. If you wanted to go through and check out any of those pick'ems over on Underdog Fantasy, if you hate Bijan Robinson and think Arthur Smith is going to screw him, you can take fewer than 80.5 total yards. I would not recommend it. But yeah, you can find that link in the description, in the comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers. And if you wanted to check out any of those community rankings, you can find those on flockfantasy.com. Those are free. My rankings are behind a paywall. Code FLOCK will get 30% off any subscription though, and yours truly to break down your fantasy football team. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope you have a great day and really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.